Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to NAUI's Dive Team Report. I'm your host, Greg Martin. You know, we talk an awful lot about the history of the diving industry here and things that have gone on in the past. Wanted to chat for just a few minutes with one of the guys that's been an integral part of the dive industry for many, many years. Dan Orr has been a part of the industry since, well, I think probably ever since he stuck his toes in the water some 60 years ago or about that, which is actually almost 20 years more than I've been diving. Part of Divers Alert Network for years, recently retired as the president and CEO of Dan. And I think now your title, Dan, is, I was always confused because you worked for Dan. Dan worked for Dan. I always got confused, but I confuse easily anyway. Now you're a consultant. So what are you consulting, Dan?
Well, that's a good question. When I retired, and actually my wife Betty retired from Dan at the same time, when we left Dan, we wanted to make it perfectly clear to people that we weren't leaving the diving industry. I mean, the industry has been such an important part of our lives, and we really love the people so much in the industry that we wanted to remain a part of it. So we decided to start a consulting company, not really knowing at the time what that was going to involve. So we started what we're calling Dan Orr Consulting, and we provide services to anybody who needs help with just about anything. And so right after we retired, we started getting a lot of calls from people who needed help with just some marketing ideas. We talked to people who needed some articles written on areas that we had some expertise in. Mine was diving safety and diving injuries, and Betty's my wife. Hers was dive travel and insurance issues because she was the vice president of insurance services at Dan. So we've been providing those kinds of services and also doing a lot for the nonprofits in the diving world. For example, the Historical Diving Society. I was up until recently the chairman of the board. I've been with them for a long, long time. I'm still a director with them. Also, the Academy of Underwater Arts and Sciences, the folks who give out the NAUI Award every year, which
right.
is like the Academy Award of Scuba Diving. I'm the president of that group because they needed some help. And then the Recreational Scuba Training Council called and said they needed some assistance. So I'm now the coordinator for the RSTC.
Do you find that retirement is busier than other life?
Oh my gosh, yeah. At least when I was working at Divers Alert Network, I was focused on one thing, that was diving safety. And now it's just about anything and everything because, as you mentioned earlier, I've been involved in the industry for quite a long time, and so I know all of the players, and I have been involved with a number of different things, including the trade association, DEMA. So I'm also on their board of directors. So with all of that background and with my fingers and toes and just about everything that's going on, people are calling me with all kinds of things that they would like us to do. And that really causes our day to be really out of focus. I mean, we're not focused on one particular thing. It's just all these different things that are going on.
Sure. I love always talking to people about their experiences getting into diving. I was a Midwest boy, and nobody would have ever thought about, learning to scuba dive in the middle of Kansas. You were an Ohio kid, if I remember right. Same
part of the time, yes.
Yeah, same basic idea, though. What brought you into the water?
Well, I was born actually in Miami, Florida. My parents lived there. My grandparents owned a home in the northern Florida Keys. So we were always relatively close to the ocean. On weekends, we would go down to the Keys and spend time at my grandparents' home, which was actually oceanfront. And we were always in the water, on the water, under the water. My brother and I did a lot of swimming and snorkeling and everything that we could just to be out there in the water. And then actually things changed for me when I happened to see a movie. A lot of people, especially people my age, talk about Lloyd Bridges and Sea Hunt. Well, before that, back in the early 1950s, there was a movie called Underwater with Jane Russell, Richard Egan, and Gilbert Roland.
I've seen that.
My parents actually took me to a drive-in theater because at the same time, Old Yeller was showing. So we watched Old Yeller, and then my parents sent me up to the front of the theater, the drive-in, and there used to be some playground equipment up there. So I took my brother up there, who was younger than I am, and I remember laying there in the grass, looking up at this screen, kind of a poor man's IMAX, and seeing, wall-to-wall, horizon-to-horizon underwater scenes from the movie Underwater. So that got me excited because it was a pirate ship that had been underwater for 300 years, and it was still fully intact, and it had gold and treasure and all kinds of things in it. So that really got me excited. So after that, every time I went in the water, I was looking for things that I knew were Spanish galleons all over the place. And that really got me interested in scuba diving. That was back in 1954, 55. But I was still very young, and so we did experiments with some equipment back in those days, but I didn't really get certified as a diver until my parents left Florida and moved to the Midwest, moved to Dayton, Ohio. And so when we moved to Dayton, my parents, for my birthday, gave me a certification course, and my brother took the course along with me. And it just so happened that the course was being taught by a guy named Ray Tussey. Ray Tussey was NAUI number 7. So my first certification was really a NAUI certification.
You talk about NAUI a little bit, and many of us have those same experiences with being a part of the NAUI world, and NAUI being the oldest. And you alluded a bit to DEMA, and DEMA came out of a NAUI program called the IQ, and you're now back involved with IQ, as I understand.
I am. I'm actually doing one of the presentations. I was actually on their planning committee for the IQ, because that was one of the things I strongly suggested when they asked me for my opinion, that they bring back the IQ, because it's one of those things that really made NAUI unique.
Why?
Well, because no one else does it. No one else has an educational program that is purely directed towards making the sport safer and making divers more knowledgeable. I mean, every organization has programs they do for their instructors, but there is no other organization, as far as I know, that does a program that welcomes anybody and everybody and is taught by people, or people give lectures who are NAUI affiliated, but it's not restricted just to NAUI instructors or NAUI divers.
Going to be an exciting time. Long Beach Scuba Show is when the IQ will take place, which is coming up quickly here as the calendar days seem to fly by. What do you see for the future of the dive industry? I'm sure you've been asked this many, many times.
Well, it's challenging. It's challenging because of the competition from other recreational pursuits. There are a lot of things, for example, like skiing and fishing and a number of other things where you literally can go buy the equipment that day. You can be out enjoying that sport the very, very same day. Diving is different, and diving requires more education. It requires more time with the equipment. It requires a lot of educational process. So it's not just simply buying the equipment and getting out and doing it the same day, because there are some inherent risks there, that then education is a very important component of that. So right now, there's a lot of changes going on where you have electronic education, which is good and bad. I mean, there are some really great things about electronic education, because when you do things online, you have access to so much information. So you can be doing an electronic lesson, and there's a link there that takes you to something on the history of the sport, or something about equipment, or something about some other educational area that you couldn't really do in a classroom. So the student has access to so much information just on the click of a button, and that's very, very important. So I think that's going to continue to develop over time, and then I think equipment's going to become easier to use. I mean, we've already seen integrated buoyancy compensators. We've already seen the development of electronic devices that will do a lot of the calculations for you, so you no longer have to look at dive tables, which is always a kind of a frustrating area for students anyway.
Sure.
So there are a lot of those things. I think diving is going to become easier, but the challenges we have, the fact that it is a very expensive sport, and it's something that is time intensive. And that's something we're going to have to overcome. Plus, we have an aging population. One of the areas that I do a lot of presentations about is the aging diver, because a lot of people are under the impression that just because you reach a certain age, you have to stop the sport. In fact, when I was at Divers Alert Network, I did have a lady who called me one day who was very, very upset because she said that Dan had told her she had to stop diving when she was 60 years old. And I told her, I said, well, first of all, Dan would never say that. And there's no evidence to indicate that that's really true. And I asked her if she was in good health. She said she was. And I said, well, as long as you're in good health and you have approval from your physician, there's no reason why you have to stop. And so that actually caused me to develop a whole series of lectures that I give on the aging diver to let people know that there are some challenges you have when you age, but it doesn't mean you have to stop the sport. So we have an aging population, and we have young people who are, their attention is diverted to areas that are not necessarily the same as diving. So we have to get more young people involved in the sport. And that's one of the things that the trade association, DEMA, is doing. They have a program called Go Dive Now, which is something that will allow people interested in the sport to go online and be directed to a professional dive store or instructor who can get them in the water. And so a lot of the training organizations are trying to interest young people or let them know the importance and the value of the sport. Plus also, the environment's going through a lot of changes, and that doesn't help the sport either. So there you might have read or probably have read in the paper or online about the challenges of the Great Barrier Reef right now because of coral bleaching. So those kind of things people look at and they say, well, if the coral reefs are dying, why should I get into the sport? Well, I mean, of course, those things happen and the environment goes through a lot of changes, but it doesn't mean that people have nothing to see. I mean, there's a lot of diving, as you know, and I know, diving in the Midwest. There are no coral reefs in quarries. And so we still were out there enjoying. There's no coral reefs in the Great Lakes or in the Northeast United States or Northwest. So there's still a lot of things that you can see, even if you can't travel to places like the Barrier Reef.
The reefs, I think, that we dealt with back then were usually called Chrysler or Ford or sometimes International Harvester or...
Absolutely. I don't know how many photos I have of old wrecked cars at the bottom of course. I love every minute of it.
Looking forward to checking out the IQ and Dan Orr's presentation there. What is the presentation that you're going to talk about again?
It's called Diver Fatalities, Lessons Learned. And it's a presentation about risks associated with the sport. And unfortunately, we do know that there are fatalities. And this presentation actually dissects a multiple fatality and looks at what happened, what could have happened, what should have happened to prevent that accident. So the message really is that things do happen, but you just need to make sure you're prepared to deal with it. And preparation is really an important part of diving safety.
Sounds fascinating. Always interested to learn more about that end of the business because we want to keep diving for as long as we can and do it as safely as we possibly can. Dan, I can't thank you enough for your time. I know that you're on the road, and we want to get you back to your lovely wife and get you busy with what you're doing. So I need to say thank you very much for your time this morning.
My pleasure, Greg. Really appreciate it, and hopefully everybody will show up at the IQ, and it'll be a great learning experience for everyone. I know it will be. If you need more information, of course, you can always visit the NAUI website, NAUI.org, and find information there about the NAUI IQ. If you enjoy the podcasts, please be sure and subscribe on iTunes or Google Play so that you don't miss a single episode. And if you do like it, I wish you would possibly hit that positive review button there. Give us that 5-star rating so we can pass that on to a lot of our other folks out there. And if you like what you hear too, be sure and drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at podcast@naui.org. And again, Dan Orr, safe travels, safe diving for you, my friend. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Same to everyone else.
And that's going to wrap it up for this episode of NAUI's Dive Team Report. I'm Greg Martin. Thank you for listening to NAUI's Dive Team Report. Again, NAUI.org. Be sure and check that out, and I'll see you underwater.